Ryan didn't fall in love with MIA all at once. It happened the way dusk turns to night, subtle, slow, a deepening of shadows rather than a sudden dark. He was never one for declarations, grand gestures, or the fireworks of passion that came and went in a flare. Ryan was a software engineer by trade. But by heart, he was an architect of routines. He loved through consistency, through the reliable warmth of morning coffee, the steady hand on a tired back, the quiet way he always remembered which side of the bed she liked best. His love was built, brick by brick, in silence and sincerity. MIA, by contrast, was a sunflare in heels. She worked as an executive assistant to one of the city's most prominent marketing executives. And it suited her, polished, poised, endlessly articulate. She was magnetic in boardrooms, in lobbies, in line at the coffee shop. People turned to look when she entered a room, and not just because she was beautiful, but because she shimmered with the self-assurance of someone who knew how to bend energy to her will. For a time, they were balance. Ryan, with his quiet steadiness, MIA, with her luminous drive. She said he kept her grounded. He said she taught him to look up. Their apartment was filled with mismatched artifacts of both worlds, tech magazines stacked beside fashion lookbooks. 2 coffee mugs, his minimalist, hers printed with gold cursive, Boss Babe. But then came the late nights. At first, they were rare, a few evenings a month where MIA would call around 6 and say, "Baby, I'm so sorry, we've got a pitch due in the morning. I'll be home late." Ryan believed her. There was no reason not to. She was always apologetic, always kind. She'd return after 10 p.m., exhausted but sweet, often with takeout for both of them and a bottle of wine she insisted on opening no matter the hour. Then the calls became texts. Then the apologies got shorter. Late again, don't wait up. Ryan noticed the pattern before he questioned it. The dinners he ate alone became a habit. The wine bottles remained unopened. She still kissed him when she came home, but quicker now. Like punctuation instead of a paragraph. Her smile, though still present, began to feel practiced. It wasn't until she started mentioning her boss more often that the knot began to tighten in Ryan's stomach. "God, Matthew's a machine," she'd say, slipping off her heels. "He never sleeps. I don't know how his wife puts up with it." "He's married?" Ryan asked the first time she mentioned him. "Yeah," MIA replied casually. 2 kids. Gorgeous wife. Total family man. "Don't worry. He's harmless." Ryan hadn't been worried, not at first, but when she said, "Don't worry," a third, fourth, fifth time, he began to wonder why she kept saying it. He tried to dismiss the doubts. He told himself love meant trust. He remembered how she looked the night he proposed, how her voice shook when she said yes, how her fingers trembled as she put on the ring. But doubt has a way of seeping through even the tightest seals. The moment that truly shifted something came on a Wednesday evening. It was raining. Ryan had wrapped up early from a system launch meeting and decided, on a whim, to surprise MIA at her office with her favorite Vietnamese noodles. He hadn't told her he was coming. He imagined her lighting up at the sight of him, her co-workers smiling, maybe teasing her affectionately. But when he arrived, the building was unusually quiet. Most of the floor had emptied. Only one light glowed at the end of the hallway, the executive wing. Ryan made his way quietly, the paper bag warm in his hand. As he turned the final corner, he stopped. The office door opened. MIA stepped out. Behind her, Matthew, the boss. She was laughing, not her public laugh, not the light, airy tone she used at brunches and networking events. This was her real laugh. The one Ryan used to hear when they watched dumb horror movies in bed. Matthew leaned against the doorframe. He wasn't touching her, not explicitly, but his body angled toward hers with a familiarity that felt wrong. Her hand brushed his shoulder as she turned. Then she saw Ryan. Her smile faltered, just for a beat, then snapped back in place. "Hey, baby," she said brightly, "what are you doing here?" Ryan smiled. Or tried to. "Thought you might be hungry." She walked toward him. kissed him on the cheek. Her skin was warm, her perfume was new. Matthew nodded in greeting. Ryan, right, I've heard a lot about you. Ryan nodded, murmured something polite. The air was too thick, the hallway too silent. On the way home, MIA was her usual self. Chatty, affectionate, grateful for the food. She went on about a new campaign, a client who was being impossible, how she'd earned praise from the CEO that afternoon. But Ryan barely heard her. He stared out the window, watching the city lights smear past like paintbrushes dragged across glass. She was still sweet, still wearing the ring, still calling him babe. But something had changed. He could feel it, and worse, he couldn't name it. That night, he lay awake while she slept beside him, her breath even, her arm draped across his chest like always. But Ryan didn't feel held. He felt alone, and for the first time in their shared life, he wondered if love, true love, was supposed to feel like guessing, or if it had simply become a mask, smiling from across a late-night hallway. He closed his eyes, but sleep never came. Ryan sat on the edge of the bed, turning the invitation card over in his hand. It wasn't an actual invitation, more of a text MIA had shown him a few days earlier. Screen tilted just enough for him to read without asking. It's not really a bachelorette party, she'd said, brushing her fingers through his hair like the subject was no more than wind in a field. More of a gathering, networking. Matthew's hosting it at his penthouse. Just some people from the agency. A few creatives. Low-key. Ryan tried not to react. Your boss? He's been helping with my transition. You know, prepping me for a more senior client-facing role. This is just part of that. Don't worry, baby. It's not like I'm getting drunk with college friends and playing stripper bingo. She smiled when she said it. Teasing, disarming, but Ryan didn't laugh. There was something off, not just about the party, but about the way MIA framed it. She had always been ambitious. Yes, but she'd also been fiercely loyal to her roots. In their earlier years together, she used to roll her eyes at the idea of networking as personality. Now she wore it like armor. The lines between career and identity had started to blur. He asked, quietly, is anyone from your old friend group going? Nora, Steph? Mia's lips thinned slightly. No, they're not really in that world. It's mostly agency people. Plus, you know how Nora gets about high-end things. I don't need that vibe. Ryan nodded, but inside, something pinched. Not jealousy, exclusion. The evening of the party arrived under a sky of soft clouds and static air. The kind of weather that made the city feel suspended in breath. MIA was radiant in a black jumpsuit that shimmered when she moved. Her hair swept up in a way that said effortless but took an hour. Her perfume was sharper than usual, clean, crisp, with undertones of something floral and faintly exotic. Not her signature scent. She caught him noticing. It's a gift, she said, from the team. They said it's more, executive woman. He didn't reply. As they drove to the address, an upscale tower on the edge of the arts district, MIA hummed to music he didn't recognize. She was excited, visibly so, checking her phone, reapplying gloss, glancing at her reflection in the side mirror. When they pulled up to the entrance, a valet approached. Ryan turned to her. Want me to wait and walk you up? She hesitated just long enough for him to notice. No, it's fine. It's invite only upstairs. You probably won't get through security anyway. Right, he said. She leaned in, kissed him on the cheek. Don't wait up. He forced a smile. Have fun. She stepped out of the car and adjusted the strap of her clutch. Her heels clicked softly against the marble floor as she approached the building. And then, the door opened. Matthew, her boss, stood there, dressed in a tailored blazer, no tie, glass of something amber in his hand. He wasn't old, not in the traditional sense, but he was older than MIA, handsome in the practiced way of men who know their influence. Ah, he said, stepping forward, the bride-to-be. He reached out, took her hand lightly, then pulled her into a brief embrace. His fingers brushed the small of her back. You look stunning, MIA, absolutely stunning. She laughed, the same laugh Ryan had heard 1,000 times. But tonight it didn't feel like it belonged to him. Ryan watched from the car. His hands remained on the steering wheel, knuckles white. The valet approached his window. "Would you like me to park it, sir?" Ryan shook his head. "No, just waiting." But he wasn't, not really. He stayed long enough to see them disappear into the elevator. Matthew's hand resting gently on the small of her back, guiding her into a place Ryan could not follow. Then he drove away. No music, no thoughts, just the echo of the phrase she had whispered minutes before, "Don't wait up." He didn't, because in that moment, watching her be welcomed into a world that felt nothing like the one they had built, Ryan realized something quiet and cruel. He didn't belong there, not in that lobby, not in that circle, and maybe, just maybe, not in her future. He didn't cry, he didn't scream, but something unmoored inside him. Something steady and familiar that had carried him through years of compromise and late-night forgiveness. It didn't snap. It simply let go. It arrived like a ghost, unseen, unheard, yet somehow already inside him. A single email, no subject, no sender, no name, just silence wrapped in code. It appeared at 7:42 a.m., the precise moment Ryan set his coffee down. Steam curling into the sharp morning light that cut through the apartment like a scalpel. He almost didn't open it. The subjectless ones were always junk. Offers for miracle diets, overseas fortunes, or cryptic fishing traps. But something about this one felt heavier, as though the air around his inbox had shifted the moment it appeared. He clicked. The message was 5 words. "She was never yours to lose." That was all. No greeting, no explanation, no signature, just a statement that read less like accusation and more like inevitability. Ryan's chest didn't tighten, his hands didn't shake. Instead, there was an eerie stillness, like the eye of a storm that had been approaching for years but had never announced itself until now. His body felt it before his mind did. A cold familiarity, as though some buried truth had finally surfaced and laid itself bare. There was an attachment, a zip folder named simply, 423 event. He opened it. Inside were images, 8 of them. Grainy, security camera quality, pulled from an angle high in the corner of a marble hallway. All bore timestamps from the night of Mia's so-called networking celebration. The first frame, MIA walking confidently down the corridor of a penthouse floor. Hair pinned in that executive sleek way she favored lately, her clutch tucked under one arm, her smile casual, unguarded. The second, Matthew behind her. No distance, no hesitance, his hand just brushing the back of her arm, casual. Yes, but proprietary in a way Ryan had come to recognize in boardrooms and bars. The third, MIA turning toward a door. Room 1202, her hand on the doorknob. Matthew's hand gently pressed against her back. The fourth, her laughing. Her head tilting toward him. Not shy, not formal, familiar. The fifth, her fingers on his chest, just above his heart. The sixth, the door half open. The seventh, both stepping inside. The eighth, the door closing. And then nothing, except the timestamp. For 1 hour and 47 minutes. No one entered or exited room 1202. Ryan didn't move for a long time. The apartment around him seemed to stretch, grow distant, as if the walls themselves wanted to recede from the truth now pulsing on the screen. He finally reached for his coffee. It was cold. The bitterness had bloomed into something metallic. He sipped anyway. Then he stood up, slowly, like an old man waking from a long dream. His feet carried him to the printer without a word. He opened the folder again, selected the images, and hit print. Not out of anger, out of ritual. Screens flicker, files disappear, but paper has weight, ink has permanence. He needed to hold this betrayal in his hands, not just see it, but feel it press back. As the printer hummed, he returned to the bedroom, opened the top drawer where they kept the travel documents. The guidebooks, the brochure for the Greek island they were supposed to explore as newlyweds. He pushed those aside and pulled out the suitcase. It still had the tags. still smelled faintly of cedar and new beginnings. He packed without emotion: shirts, a pair of jeans, socks, the worn hoodie she used to steal on cold nights, his laptop, the black moleskin notebook where he kept old poems and unfinished thoughts, toothbrush, razor, phone charger. He left the ring box. When he returned to the kitchen, the printer was silent. The photos lay in a neat pile. He didn't need to look at them again. He knew them by heart now. He stacked them, slipped them into a manila folder, placed it gently on the table. Beside it, he left the invitation card, the one they had both signed together, laughing about who had better handwriting. He folded it once, then again, until it fit cleanly beneath the photos. It felt like burying something. He didn't leave a note, didn't pack a backup plan. This wasn't an escape, it was an exit, the kind made not in haste, but with reverence. He took one last look around. The couch still bore the indent of where she had fallen asleep with wine on her breath. The bookshelf, the mug with the chipped handle she refused to throw away, the succulent they'd both forgotten to water, it was all still there. Still life, frozen mid-scene, but the man who had once belonged to this life no longer did. He opened the front door, stepped into the hall. Behind him, the door closed. It didn't click, it locked, and Ryan, suitcase in hand, didn't look back, because there are wounds too deep for confrontation. And some truths so absolute. They need no explanation, only distance. It began not with an explosion, but with a whisper, an email sent at 3:17 a.m., composed not in rage, but in the calm precision of a man who had already made peace with the end. Ryan sat in the dim light of a roadside motel outside the city. His suitcase lay half unzipped by the door. The manila folder sat on the bed beside him. The images, printed in black and white, were now creased at the corners, handled not out of obsession, but duty. He drafted the first message to Human Resources at Mia's company. The subject line was clinical: professional conduct violation, confidential materials enclosed. He kept the body simple, professional, almost detached. To whom it may concern, please find attached time-stamped images taken from the evening of April 23. At an event hosted by Mr. Matthew Lang, during which Ms. Mia Taylor, currently employed under his supervision, entered a private suite with him and remained there for an extended period. I understand your organization has clear policies regarding hierarchical relationships and ethical boundaries. I leave the assessment and action to your discretion. Respectfully, a concerned party. He read it 3 times. Not out of doubt, but finality. Then he attached the photos. All 8. Pressed send. The second email was harder. It was addressed to a personal Gmail account, one Ryan had found after scrolling through an old RSVP Mia had forwarded to him weeks earlier. An RSVP to their engagement party, from none other than Natalie Lang, the wife. Ryan hesitated longer this time, not because he didn't believe she deserved to know, but because he did, fully. He wrote, "Mrs. Lang, you don't know me, but we shook hands once at a brunch your husband hosted last month. You brought lemon tarts. I remember because you were the only one who didn't compliment our engagement just to sound polite. I'm writing to you not out of revenge, but solidarity." Attached are images from April 23. I believe they show something you should have seen before anyone else did. I'm sorry, Ryan. This time, he didn't reread, he just sent it. And then he closed the laptop. What followed was silence, not immediate fallout, no grand cinematic collapse, just a slow unraveling of a carefully curated life. 72 hours later, the dominoes fell. Matthew Lang was suspended from his role as managing partner, pending internal investigation. 2 days after that, he resigned, citing personal reasons, though everyone in the firm knew the euphemism by heart. 1 week later, court documents were filed. Natalie Lang's name appeared on the top line. Grounds: breach of fidelity. No contest. Mia received her termination notice on a Thursday morning. It came not from her direct supervisor, but from the executive board. The language was formal, distant, but unmistakable. Violation of company policy regarding professional conduct within managerial relationships. No room for appeal. Her access was revoked within the hour. Her desk boxed by noon. She returned to the apartment Ryan had vacated, expecting perhaps a confrontation, a reckoning, but there was only absence. His ring was gone, his clothes, the books she pretended not to notice him annotate. What remained was a silence so complete it rang. She tried to call, he didn't answer. She tried to email, it bounced. She reached out to her friends, those she hadn't seen since the party. But replies came slow, if at all. Whispers had traveled through the industry. Names were dropped in hushes. And everyone, suddenly, had nothing to say to her. It was her mother who delivered the final blow. The call came in on a Sunday. "We received the letter from your company," her mother said, her voice more tired than angry. "And from the Lang family lawyer." MIA stood in the kitchen, barefoot, still wearing the silk robe Ryan had bought her last Christmas. "Mom, please." "No," her mother cut in. "We've given you every chance. Defended you even when we didn't understand you. But this isn't a mistake. This is a choice. And choices have consequences." MIA sat on the floor as her mother's voice went flat. "We've cancelled the venue, the invitations, everything. We won't pay for the apartment anymore. It's time you learned how to stand alone." Then came the click of disconnection, a sound more final than a slammed door. MIA cried, but not like a heroine in a film. There were no heaving sobs, no dramatic collapse, just soft, bitter tears that soaked the collar of the robe she suddenly realized she could no longer afford to dry clean. She was alone. The mentor she idolized, gone. The man she planned to marry, silent. The family she thought would never turn away, vanished. In a span of 3 days, her entire world had inverted. And in the center of that collapse sat only a truth she could no longer escape. She had gambled love, trust, and identity, and lost them all, quietly, completely, irrevocably. The road peeled away beneath the tires like a film reel unraveling in reverse. Mile by mile, Ryan drove through the soft silence of dawn, the city's towers shrinking behind him until they no longer resembled ambition. Only scaffolding for a life that had collapsed inward. The sky above was watercolor gray, threaded with threads of gold, as if even the sun had forgotten how to rise without struggle. His window was down, not for air, but for memory, to let it leave. The wind combed through his hair with a gentleness the last few days had not afforded. Each gust pulled at him like hands of an old life trying to hold on. But he kept driving. In the passenger seat lay his leather-bound journal, creased and softened by the weight of thoughts never voiced. Once, it had been a canvas for wedding ideas, seating charts, honeymoon notes, florals MIA adored. But now it was something else entirely. A sanctuary, a graveyard of the unsaid. Inside were pages that chronicled the slow disintegration of a love that had stopped asking questions, and a man who had run out of answers. He reached a diner just past the state line. It was the kind of place that still smelled of hash browns and cigarette ghosts, where the bell over the door sounded like the sigh of someone who had been waiting too long. The waitress, mid-50s, tired eyes, no judgment, poured him coffee without asking. It tasted like burned resolve. Ryan took a booth in the corner, set his journal down, and opened to a blank page. He stared at the paper a long time. Then, finally, he wrote, "I thought I had to stay. That staying was strength. That love meant endurance, even when it hurt. But it doesn't. Love without dignity isn't love. It's servitude. And walking away isn't surrender. It's refusing to compete in a game that was always bent against you." He paused, ran his fingers along the margin. Some battles aren't lost, they're left behind. No signature. The words didn't need one. They weren't addressed to anyone else. Just to the part of himself that needed permission to heal. His phone buzzed. Once. Then again. And again. MIA. He didn't check the screen. He didn't need to. He knew the rhythm of remorse. The desperate cadence of someone who had mistaken his silence for uncertainty. She would be apologizing now. perhaps begging, perhaps weaving a new version of the truth where intentions outweighed actions. But Ryan no longer needed stories. Because silence had taught him something more sacred than closure. That peace is not given. It is claimed. He turned off his phone. Not as a declaration, not as punishment, but as a release. A ritual, like closing a book whose ending you already know. And choosing, finally, to begin another. He looked out the diner window. A mother helped her daughter into a booster seat. A trucker wiped his mouth with the back of his hand. Life moved forward, indifferent but inviting. Ryan smiled. He paid in cash, left a generous tip, and walked out into the sun, lighter. Not because the weight had vanished, but because he no longer needed to carry what was never his. He slid back behind the wheel, turned the key. The engine hummed like an old friend clearing its throat. And as he pulled back onto the road, the city a memory now stitched to a chapter that would no longer be reread. Ryan didn't think of MIA. He thought of the man he had been. The man who had loved fully, fought gently, waited patiently, and he honored him, not by returning, but by walking away, because not all victories are loud. Some come quietly, like morning light through a cracked window. Some arrive not in confrontation, but in calm. And some begin with the simplest act of all, letting go. The screen fades to black. And one final truth appears. Don't feel like a loser for walking away from a game they rigged from the start.